Okay, we will go ahead and get started since I think I'm a few minutes late anyway. Okay, so today we are going to do more material design in Xaml work. Last time, for those people who can remember 2 weeks back, I think it was, I had left off working on some scrollbar interactions for the 2.6.0 release. So there was a desire to put in a better scrollbar, something that actually sort of mimics the scrollbar that we see on the Google Material Design Spec website. And actually, let me switch scenes real quick and I'll go back through and do it. So I think that is where we are going to start. Let's see here. So there's that. Material design. And let's take a look here. So on this site, which is somewhat what I'm going to base this design on, because there's not actually a declaration in the spec of what a scrollbar should look like. Largely because I think material design was probably designed for phone, and so some of the desktop-y type controls aren't necessarily fully outlined, and so it gives a little bit of creative behavior. But you can see that this scrollbar, one, unlike the normal Windows one, doesn't have the repeat buttons, the scroll up and scroll down. I guess this one does. It's just hiding the one at the top. But it has the gray faded out, darkens a little bit as your mouse goes over, darkens even more on the click, and then you can scroll up and down. So that's sort of what we were going for. There is an issue out on the GitHub repo where there was some discussion going back and forth with a bunch of people kind of weighing in on what the scroll bar inside of this library needs to have and should have. And so sort of a couple features that were outlined is the ability to show and hide these buttons. There was very much a desire for that to be effectively an attached property or optional, so that people could turn that on or off or opt into having those hidden, because on Windows it does sort of make sense to show that most of the time. And then also, and I'll admit to being sort of the one behind this, there was this desire to be able to sort of round the corners. So this bit that goes up and down inside of the scroll bar is called the thumb. And so being able to sort of round this off so that you can get a rounded look to that was also something that people at least expressed desire to be configurable. So with that in mind, that's sort of where we were going. If anyone has questions, feel free to drop in the chat. I do not mind getting distracted from whatever I'm looking at. Otherwise, I'm just going to plow straight ahead on what I had in mind for doing on this. But again, I love answering questions. I love working on the Gitter chat room. So if people have questions then, feel free to post them. Always happy to go through and do that. So that is where we were going. And last time we had started with a pull request that was put in. But then, let me grab it here real quick. There was another pull request that came in last week that got updated earlier today. So let me grab that and I'll show you what's in there. So there's, and it actually interested me because the pull request that we had left off with lacked a couple things. And then this one, specifically those optional toggles for showing and hiding the repeat buttons. And then you can see if I can zoom this in a little bit, the rounding of the corners on this scroll bar to be able to make those configurable as well. So Albert, I'll probably, Alonso, I apologize if I'm butchering that last name, sent in this pull request, which is great. It actually covers almost everything that we need in here. The one thing that I think is missing is, so he commented that he saw that this PR duplicates 651, which is the one that we were looking at before, but I think this one's actually a little bit further along than that one. So I wanted to start from there because I think this one there's a lot of overlap because there's only so much you can do with these scroll bar styles and not duplicate existing work. But I think this one is mildly ahead of where we left off on the last stream. So I think we're going to pick it up there and run with it. So I have the pull request checked out, but what I do not have is the latest changes for it. So what we are going to do is stash what I had looked at, and then I'm going to pull up the latest changes from his branch, and then we will go from there. So let's grab the latest, because there was a couple things about this that I wanted to clean up, and he actually took care of them earlier. So we'll start from there. So pull successful. Thank you, get cracking. Go ahead and refresh. Great. And then let's pop my stash real quick. And there's probably a conflict or two. So let's take a look real quick. I can probably just take his changes because I think it's probably, yeah, around these same brushes. Because he ultimately ended up removing them, which is one of the things I wanted to do. That's the only conflict. So perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so let's take a quick look and see. I just want to refresh my memory of where I had left off, because I had looked at this pull request earlier and had started down this path of being able to work with it. So there was this. I had started pulling in the Visual State Manager on the scroll bar. For those who watched the last video, ultimately that's what we're going to use to go through and do the lightening and darkening. One of the issues that I did notice right away is the current lightening and darkening that's happening right now was coming from the scroll viewer, not necessarily the scroll bar itself, which was causing a lot of problems. So one, this was initially done with the old control template triggers doing enter and exit actions, which are fine. However, you can sometimes run into timing issues with both of these on enter and exits. And so it's because both of these are begin storyboard, not necessarily stop storyboard. And so generally you want to end up using the Visual State Manager over this pattern. This is just old code that hasn't been touched in a very long time. So as part of this, I think we're going to rip this out because this was defaulting to applying an opacity of 56%. And so we are going to switch and let the scroll bar itself be in charge of managing that rather than having the scroll viewer sort of dictate that from above. So I think that's where we left off. Let's fire this guy up and make sure we're back in a good working state, because I know I had broken this several times over before. Lots of stuff. I don't need this one. I don't need this one. So let's come back over here. So we've got scroll bars where we primarily want to work, and then scroll viewer just with the stuff that we took off. So let's fire this guy up. The other thing that he did was he went through and added in, I should say that Albert did, is he went through and he actually applied it, as we saw from those screenshots, to the scroll bar where you can pick the various views inside of the demo app. So we're going to take a look at that and just sort of use that as our guide and hopefully end up with something, again, that looks kind of like this. Come back. Yeah. So, and we will go from there. Come on, Visual Studio, you can do it. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. There's so many things for you to be doing right now. I had hoped to go through and use a different screen share utility so I could split the streaming across two machines, but unfortunately ran out of time this afternoon getting that set up. So that will be an attempt for next time, just so that I can hopefully get these compiles sped up so this machine isn't doing the streaming and the code compiling all together. Because this is a decent machine, but it was never designed to do this much. Okay, so let's pop this guy open here, and there we have it. So there is the scroll bar as it currently sits. Let's see, magnifier. Come on, where's my magnifier? So if we take a little bit, let's see here, what is it? Windows Plus, there we go. You can see on here, sort of the setup with the rounded corners and the repeat buttons. The one thing that it is missing is I do want this to, one, be a lighter shade until you mouse over it and have it darken, and then darken a little bit more again when you ultimately click on it. So that's I think where we're going to go. So back out, back out. Thank you, magnifier. So I'm going to leave that guy running because I think I can probably get away with this. So the one thing I wanted to look at is, so there's a bunch of these styles around the repeat buttons and all of those, and I'm a little bit less concerned with those for the moment. Let's see, scroll bar button, scroll bar, and just for my own sanity, I prefer to have these things separated with some sort of space between them so I can see. So I believe these are the visual state groups available on the scroll bar as a cheater mode. One of the things you can always do is punch in WPF default control templates. I believe gets me there. And this guy, so there's a wonderful docs page, and I will say this, the styles and templates shown here are very similar to the default WPF ones, but they are in no means identical. So don't take this to be, when you look at this, that, oh, this is exactly what the default one looks like. It's close, but I have found discrepancies. Part of it, I think, comes from the fact that the default templates have been kind of updated over time, so this may have matched at one point, but it is just meant as a guide. So the key part here that we're looking for is on the scroll bar. So these scroll bar states is what we're looking for. So these are the various visual states that we can, or that the control looks for, and will transition into based upon, you know, when the mouse goes over, when it's disabled, etc. So that is what we are going for. And I think really what we're looking for is normal, mouse over, and then we'll probably have to do something a little different for the drag. Normal over mouse. Why do I have pressed in here? I did not see pressed in the lineup. Scroll bar thumb, vertical scroll bar. Why did I think pressed was a choice? That one may just be invalid. It's worth noting with the Visual State Manager, you can declare any visual state that you want. The problem is the control itself is what declares the states that it's going to move into. So let's just take a look here real quick. Normally the controls for the visual states are decorated right at the top, but I can't remember whether those show up if you look at the decompiled source or if those are elsewhere. They don't show up here. We could probably poke around, but I'm not really interested. It's just, yeah, I was kind of thinking that those are probably buried in different spots, so not going to worry about it for now. But what we do want to do is deal with this guy. So we've got an opacity being set, and I defaulted it to 56, and I think what we want to do is just bring in something like this, where it's going to be not a color animation, that much is wrong, but it's going to be, we'll kill execution. The live Xaml edit is good to a point until it's not, and then you really just gotta jump out. So let's do, come on, where's my IntelliSense? Double animation. Let's see, and we will go from there. Let's make it really obvious, I guess, at the moment. Duration, I think we probably want something like fairly fast, 0.2 of a second. Let's see, so storyboard, I think we can do target name here and get away with doing the background, and then storyboard, target property, opacity. So let's just collapse this and let's get some more more space to see code. Okay, let's take a look at that. And hopefully this starts to get us closer to that, because I think this scroll bar PR is really close. I just want to get these animations and states figured out, because I think this is probably going to be the last big in quotes, UI bit that gets added to the 2.6.0 release. There's a chance, or I should say it's the last one I'm likely to work on to add. If there's a pull request that comes in, something might get considered, but the 2.6.0 release is largely going to be around the new theming API. There's lots of bug fixes and little things people have brought in, so thank you to everyone who's contributed. And then this scroll bar, I think, is probably going to be the big ticket items. And after that, I'm hoping that the next big one that gets merged in is the support for .NET 3.0 or Net Standard 5 as it's now being called. So no worky. So now the question is, what the heck did I do wrong? So let's jump back here real quick and make sure. Mouse over the control. Okay, well that's no bueno. So let's start with everybody's favorite UI debugging tool, Snoop. The UI stuff in Visual Studio is okay, but by and large I still consider Snoop leaps and bounds ahead of it. Even just something simple as the difference between this property editor versus the live property editor. The one advantage the Visual Studio tools have is they can link back to your original source code when they find it. So that much is convenient. So let's see, it's ultimately up here. It's this guy that we're hoping to modify, so let's just make sure it's not my eyes biting me. Oh, hold up. Am I looking at the wrong border? Because that says BD, not BG. Where am I at? Scroll bar grid. That's the scroll viewer. Scroll bar. Okay, so there's scroll bar. Grid. Repeat button, track. Okay, what am I doing here? Material design, scroll bar. So let's just make sure that this guy's style. So on this property editor, you can always go through and do a pipe to basically do an OR filter to find out or to filter on different properties. So anything that has opacity or style in it will then show up. So you can see a bunch of these guys are now matched, which is great. So implicit style, but which style is this? Interesting. So this guy, I assume this is the implicit scroll bar style, and this is the one that's based on. Interesting. Am I just looking at the wrong style to begin with? This guy's based on a style. So fuchsia. When in doubt, make it ugly and it will show. So I must have the wrong style in here. So let's take a look. Is there... Oh, hang on. So this is a trigger on orientation horizontal. That's fine. We should be orientation vertical. What's going on here? Scrollbar button line. Why don't I see this in my visual tree? Oh. Control template, vertical scrollbar. This, unfortunately, looks like horizontal scrollbar. Ah ha ha. Material design scrollbar style. Ah ha ha. So I have been looking at the wrong one. So these ones here, so let's ignore the horizontal one for a moment. Vertical scrollbar. So we have this guy here, which I suspect means he's not used much, or he's an opt-in. Ah, material design scrollbar style versus material design scrollbar. Right, if I had read carefully, I think I remember in this pull request that these are new styles, not additions to the old one. Got it. Ooh, boy. Now I'm left with another choice, and I'm somewhat inclined to bring in, so this guy is actually using the button one, so we're gonna bring that in. Let's see. Well, hold on. Before I bring this in, the question should be, should this exist here? Ah, boy. Because I'm somewhat inclined to, at minimum, I like the name, the Material Design Scroll Bar. And that way, at least in your IntelliSense, once you type Material Design Scroll Bar, everything else comes as a suffix to that. Whereas this has the name change in the middle. Well, not necessarily here, but But this does, okay, so let's change this up a little bit. Because this allows for pulling this through. So there's the visibility, scroll bar line button. That's where these guys come in. Boy, I am really tempted to just replace the original ones with these. Really tempted to replace these. So I'm a little hesitant to add in a bunch of new keys if I can make the old ones work. So let's go back then up to the demo. And we might have a little bit of chicken and the egg here, where I've got some stuff on one pull request and some stuff on another, and I kind of want a little bit of both. Well, let's go through here and do this. So let's just look at Git real quick. How was this applied on the main window? So that would have been his first commit here, main window. Just look at the diff. Toolbar, selected index, where am I? So it's being done like that with the list box resources. Got it. Okay. That's the dialog host. Where's... Okay. There must have been some cleanup on the next commit. Look at that, there was. pulled that back out. And what was the defaults change here then? Let's see, type scroll bar. Ah, so the default scroll bar was swapped out. Got it. Okay. So that means that there really isn't anything to do in the main window per se. However, the change then comes down here in our defaults. So to get back to our other one, we need our scroll bar here, and we'll drop back into the other one. So that will cause us to lose the nice rounded corner options and the minimalist width, but I think we can fix that. So I think what we'll do is we'll just bring up the portions of these templates into the existing ones, and then we can whack the new templates and just take we'll just scavenge the bits and pieces that we want, because I think that my preference is to not necessarily add new styles. I know that because that was one of the questions on that scroll bar issue, of whether there should be brand new styles that people can use to opt into, or whether there should be attached properties. Both of them kind of have their pluses and minuses. Attached properties, the biggest drawback to them is it's really hard for people to discover them. They usually either have to see an example or find some bit of documentation that says, hey, by the way, this is there. However, they do make things really convenient for sort of those more obscure changes that a lot of people don't necessarily want. And so we may end up keeping, I think what we might do is I might just move the word minimal on the second style to the end, and we'll have an overloaded style for kind of getting some of these defaults out the gate. There we go. There's our ugly fuchsia, and now we're getting the opacity change. Interesting that the opacity is starting at 1 and changing. I thought we were defaulting that differently. Okay, so that gets us. Okay, so let's put you back to transparent. That should come on. Go and update the controls. Okay, so that goes there. So on mouse over. But that feels a lot darker than I want it to be. So for starters, let's have this guy go to 1. And this guy we're going to bump up to, I don't know, 0.7. Shooting from the hip for the moment, because I kind of want to compare. It's a little bit nicer. A little bit nicer. Where is the... Not that one. This guy. You sit to the side for a second, because that is a lot darker until I get to this. So I'm thinking whatever brush we're using is not near dark enough. So let's start with that and figure out where that thumb color is coming from. So this guy down here, and then thumb, this guy up here. So, sorry, I'm also keeping track of my son. He had surgery this last week and got his tonsils removed, and so he is having a bad week. Okay, so we're using the divider as the fill and also for the dragging color, and I think I want this guy to go darker. So let's take a look at what that is. So I believe inside that is declared in the colors, recommended themes for primary and dark. Oh, those might actually be declared up here. Theme colors. Okay. Show me the light. That one, please. Where are you declared? Oh, buddy. Oh, buddy. There you go. Okay, so material design divider. So this is effectively black at 12%, which is part of the problem. Because we're playing with the transparency of the control, and the color that's being applied already has some amount of transparency applied to it. I don't think that's quite where we want it to go. I'm wondering if I feel like divider is not what I want to go with, and I don't know if we've got a good brush preemptively for this. Somewhat inclined to do something crazy with like the body brush, but that feels wrong as well. I don't really want to repurpose the snack bar ones because those are clearly out there, and I'm a little hesitant to go through and create new ones. Ideally, a lot of these brushes should be single purpose, and I think this divider one has gotten over-purposed a lot. The advantage of the body color is it does give us, this is declared in all of the themes already. It's effectively the color of like your foreground text of what it would get applied to, and so this would then flow with the theme and switch, because I do want this to look good with the dark theme. I think maybe we go with the light one. Let's go with the dark one. Let's play with it and see what it looks like. So don't need you anymore. Come back over to Scrollbar. Okay, so you're going to take that, and you're going to take that. And that gets us a little bit further, and these values probably need to be adjusted again then, but let's see what that does for us. Way too dark, but it does get the point across. So I think is mouse over. Oh, so this is going for, oh, this is using selection. Okay, so hold on, let's go back and see. Where is selection? So DE all the way across. That is pretty white to begin with. I'm not sure I want that at all, actually. So let's just change some of this stuff up. We're gonna go crazy. I don't want to trigger on mouse over anymore. Hang on one second, guys. Okay, sorry about that. My wife was just asking questions about kids and meds and what has been given and what hasn't. Okay, so material design body is what we'll fill the thumb with initially, and then I think what I want to do is, rather than having this guy do this, we're going to do something like setter property. So I think I want to keep playing with this a little bit. Value 0.9. And then I think, let's just bring these down so I can see what's going on here. And height and width should be together because they're kind of related. Something like that. Because the is dragging property gets toggled as soon as the user clicks down the mouse, effectively when the scroll bar thumb gains mouse focus. So there. Huh? Why is that going lighter? Oh, because I did my things backwards. Should be more akin to that. So open back up. Okay, something's wrong. So mouse over, dragging. No, what am I thinking? Opacity of 1, 5. Is dragging true? I don't have anything up here that does anything fancy. There is an animation here versus a straight up one there, but those are fairly quick. So darker. Tail design body. Okay, let's make this really, really obvious. Sometimes you just have to make it really obvious so you know. It's like the is over is not, or the is dragging is not triggering, and I'm wondering if it's sometimes the live Xaml updating, again, it's great until it's not. And there's a very real chance that something didn't get updated, or occasionally you can get your app into broken invalid states because it updates at kind of a halfway point, and because it's always just doing transition, 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 sometimes one of those transitions leaves stuff hanging around. So it's really great, and then occasionally you just need to reboot your app to make sure that it really does look the way the live editor claims. I think, okay, well that guy's thinking about compiling here. I want to go back down and look at this scroll bar and see what was done for these repeat buttons. Scroll bar line button. So I think this guy here, I'm looking for how this logic was done to see what we can do, because this is the corner radius there, but the corner radius for the thumb, that was just tied in where? Why am I not? Repeat button, thumb. Ah, it's this style. Oh, and that's just fixed. I think I want to cheat a little bit. Okay, something is not working for me. So back to Snoop. We're going to figure out what's going on. So we know this visual state is working. So you sit there, you sit here. Okay, and then pro tip, the best thing about Snoop, once you get it attached to your application, if you can hover your cursor over the control that you want to inspect and then hold down Control and Shift at the same time. You'll notice you get the little red selection rectangle around it, but more importantly, it jumps you straight into the visual tree at that element. So it is by far the fastest navigation way to get around this. So definitely use that. Okay, so we have this rectangle, which is named rectangle. Oh, dang it. There's the bug. As soon as I go and explain it, sure enough, I have a setter here, but no target, so it doesn't know where to apply it. Betcha that's our problem. So if we go here, opacity, betcha when we grab it, we don't see that guy going, and then, yep. What is it? That's the rectangle. So if I look at the thumb is dragging, you can see that that guy changes as soon as I click down on it. So that property is changing, but this is not. Okay. One more time, this time with feeling, and I think we'll be in better shape. At some point, I probably want to consider changing these out to brushes. I'll need to go back and look at the WPF. They've got a wonderful page on Microsoft Docs about performance, and I can't. There is some performance implications with using transparency like this, and I can't remember which one. There's doing it with a brush versus the opacity. One of them hits performance harder than the other, and I'll need to look at which one it is, because obviously I want to do the more performant option, even if that means declaring another brush, or possibly a converter on an existing brush to just toggle the alpha. Come on, everybody. There you go. Okay, open. There. Oh, there we go. So now on the click, it's getting darker. So slightly darker on hover, more darker on drag. Okay, so that's obviously way too dark. So now we go down to our, I think something more like that. We'll let it think about itself and re-update. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So now the question is, how close are we to this? So we're a little darker initially, which means we're a little darker straight across the board. So let's go back down to here, and let's just back it off a little. And see, where does that bring us? Still a hair on the dark side, even on both cases, so we might lighten them both up. So let's go with 5 there, and something like that there, and it's pretty close. For my poor eyes. So the dark is still on the hover, is a little darker on our side. So let's not quite go as far. And then something like that, something like that. There, there. Scroll. Wish I could have these side by side. I really want to compare that color to that color. It's probably not worth splitting hairs over. That's at least, so we can bicker about the exact color later, but that at least gives us the look and feel that we were going for with the animations. So that'll handle that. I don't know why I thought pressed was valid. Let's just take that out. There is an issue with this disabled bit. I'm not entirely sure what to do about it. So let's go here. Let's start with something like this. Because generally for disabled, you go through and set an opacity on it. But I'm struggling to decide what that should be. So we can look at sort of what, just simulate it real quick. So that's sort of what the disabled look would be if we went with 2. 3. I want it to be obvious it's still there, just gone. 4. That's too much. Split the difference. Yeah, we'll go with that. So I think for now what we're just going to do is this, and this guy can go back to his 5. That should get us close to there. Okay, so that works for that. Now we have this issue here of this trigger. And I think so one thing that I noticed that was done on this other one is basically moves the setter on these guys up and out. So this narrower look is nice, but I think I want to control that a little differently. Because what is on the Scrollbar Assist right now? Just arrow visibility. I think we're gonna play with that and expand that a little bit. Because rather than having this guy be hard-coded here, I'd like to allow for a little bit easier control with just an attached property. Because toggling that width feels like something that somebody might want to do globally. I know I've had to do it on several apps where we had custom scroll bars. So I think we're gonna go with something similar. But I think what I like. So do we have material design horizontal scroll bar? I don't think we do. Just look here real quick, because I think like button has control templates at the root. I'm trying to remember if there's a suffix that we normally attach on the naming schemes for control templates. That one doesn't have. Oh, calendar will certainly have control templates. The question is, are they embedded in the style or are they separated out? No, all embedded. Well, where else might I find them? I think Listbox perhaps has a bunch. Focus visual, control templates are all largely embedded. Well, maybe we do leave it embedded for now. Just not sure I like having this sort of setup here. But let's go through and carry on our merry way. So what are you squawking about here? No grid, go ahead and set it. This isn't a big deal. This is just a resharper setting. When you have items in a grid, it notices that you have 2 elements. And even though grid.column defaults to 0 because it's not the first element, the rationale is that it may not be intentional that you've laid 2 elements effectively right on top of each other. So it wants you to be explicit about which column you're putting things in. But in this case, that is fine. I do wonder what the point of this border is. Why is this here? It's sitting on column 1. And I do not understand its intent. I'm going to leave it for now because I don't know why it's there, but I'm hesitant to just yank it out. Okay. But the one thing that we do need to do is grab this Visual State Manager and bring it down to the grid. Conveniently, they are named the same, so everything just works. We'll stop execution just to get rid of these lines. Basically, because I don't have a horizontal scroll bar loaded right now, the Xaml edit and continue can't find one to update. So it squawks at me and says, hey, this change isn't going to get applied anywhere. Are you really sure that's what you meant? Okay, so that goes there. That goes there. So the next question is how scroll bar thumb. So this guy applied a corner radius. I think what we might do is, I think I'm gonna, because I feel like the corner radius and the width of the scroll bars are probably less likely to be set directly. I want to allow for the possibility of people mixing and matching these rather than just taking predefined defaults, but I also realize that most people are probably going to take the predefined defaults. Is visibility visible the default here? Arrow visibility. It is. And I assume this guy, sorry, distracted. So that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So let's do another attached property here. Attached property. And it is going to be of type corner radius. I think thumb. Something like that. Yeah. And corner radius, I believe, is a struct, which will default to zeros if you don't do anything with it. Which it is. Perfect. So let's come back here to our scroll bar. So don't care about that. Material design, scroll bar, thumb, vertical. So how is it that this one was able to get away with a single style for the thumb? But the other one has two. Okay, so what is the difference between thumb vertical and thumb horizontal? What's going on here that's different? Oh, and we need to update both of these. So is tab stop template type thumb? There's the fill color, height, width, snap to pixels. We did the opacity and identical triggers. Boy, that really looks like duplicated styles for no apparent reason. Okay, so I assume at one point these things might have been. So in the interest of not making a breaking change, what we're going to do is we are just going to do this. Like that. And then this guy becomes based on scroll bar thumb, like that. And so now these guys will both pick up the changes, but I don't have to repeat myself on either of these. And we will leave both of these styles for backwards compatibility, because if somebody else is happening to reference these off in their own app, I don't want to break them. I wish there was a way to flag these as obsolete, but a comment will have to do for now. Obsolete. So that way we don't break people if somebody else is basing their styles on these. I suspect probably very few people are. and those that are probably retemplating their scroll bar anyway, and so it might not make a big difference, but we will do this. So that clears that, that clears that, that clears that. Now we have the thumb working in both positive and negative. But what we want to grab is we want to set a, oh, but we can't quite do a corner radius here. So let's go back down and look. Was the other one using a border rather than a rectangle? It was. It was. So the border brush is kind of meaningless with a border thickness of 0. But we can do that. And we should probably rename this, because having this that'll just break somebody later, I'm sure. Let's see, and this becomes background, and then not what we wanted to do. Thank you. Did it again. Okay, so that'll get us there. Just to be explicit, we'll set that guy off to 0 just to make sure he's not accidentally getting any thickness applied to him. And then we want our corner radius. Binding path. Let's see. Scrollbar Assist. Thumb corner radius. Fill that in for me, thanks. But this guy, I don't really want the thumb corner. So the two choices here are make this attached property propagate down, or have this guy, or just have this thumb look back up to its scroll bar. And I think I like the latter, because a thumb outside of a scroll bar, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if we're going to be calling this scroll bar thumb. It should be inside of a scroll bar. So relative source, we'll find our ancestor, and we're going to find the first scroll bar. So if that's set on our scroll bar, we'll pick it up and grab it. So let's test this real quick and make sure we can actually get this guy. What did I do? Too many closing? Yeah. Too many closings. So let's look here. This is fine, but let's do, oops. Copy. I think we're just going to change the name on this real quick. And so this will be, I don't know, corner radius, and we'll just apply a universal of 5 for now, just so we get some nice amount of corner radius. But by having this as a corner radius, it allows anybody who wants to go through, if you only want to say round one side and keep the other side straight, you are free to do that. So let's go look at applying that in our main demo app. So main window. I think we might just do that same scroll bar style, like what was done initially in Get Crackin'. There we go. So do this sort of thing where We just bring an implicit resource to change this guy up. So material design, scroll bar. What did I just named it, didn't I? Rounded. Cool. That guy there. Let's fire this up and at least make sure that that rounded bit works. And for reference, I'm not planning on leaving this rounded style in, but I think I'm going to use it for now just as a simple scroll bar target so we can test our work as we go through this. I don't know if there is a good, there's not a good page on the demo app right now to show off the scroll bar and these functionalities. I may put in a feature request if anybody wants to go through and build that out. It's not terribly difficult to do. It's fairly straightforward. So if anybody's looking to kind of get their feet wet and see about doing a pull request to the library, that would be a great start. Come on, little buddy. You can do this. I know it's hard. Ooh. New updates available. It's always exciting. I know I've mentioned this on prior streams, but do be aware, it's not likely to happen in the 2.6.0 release, but sometime shortly thereafter when we go to .NET Core 3 support in this library, it will be requiring latest versions of Visual Studio and obviously the latest versions of .NET to be installed, which is currently going to be preview releases in order to compile the library from source. So just be aware that in order to add that support, we have to have that tooling installed, so that's going to become a requirement. Look at that. Rounded corners. Sweet! Just like we planned it. And if we set this guy back to a 0, and wait for it to update, thinking. That did not update as expected. Let's relaunch and just make sure, because I do want to make sure that this feature is working before I get too carried away. And then I think I'm just going to bring this setter up here and verify that we can do the same thing with the repeat buttons hidden. I'm wondering if arrow's visibility makes sense, because arrow implies the content of the repeat button, and the buttons may or may not have arrows always. Interesting. Naming things is one of the hardest bits. And I am never 100% sold on names, so if people have better suggestions for names or things that are confusing, I would very much love to either hear a comment in the Gitter chat or an issue opened so we can discuss. Because again, naming is hard, and I don't necessarily think that the names I come up with, especially at this hour of the evening, are always the best. Okay, so let's get this guy going. That still has rounded corners. That worries me, because corner radius should have been zeroed out. So, back to Snoop. Let's figure out what's going on. Because either I've got the wrong... Let's just start with the obvious. Nope, I'm pointed at the right style. Oh. But this guy is based on the wrong style. That'll do it. So turn that guy back off. So I may have set it to the right style, but I based it on the wrong style. So Snoop, thank you, but I don't think I need you anymore. And you're probably a bit confused. Okay, so there, no corner radius. Okay, should have tested my animations to make sure it worked. I set a 5, reapply, and muchos better. Yeah, the fact that the scroll bar was narrow should have been another dead giveaway for me. Okay, so there is it with the corner radius applied. If you want the little rounded tips at the top and then bottom on your scroll bars. Cool. So let's bring this guy up. Now, I don't expect this to do anything because we have nothing in our old templates that's watching for that. But what we can do is come back over to our scroll bar style and we can go and bind these buttons to them. So material design scroll bar button. I think I just take advantage of the fact that these things are all using the same style, even in the horizontal, right? Yeah, I think we can just leverage this same style. So I think we just do a setter right here and call it a day. Property, visibility, and the value will once again be a relative binding. So binding path, do the parens for the attached property, WPF, scroll bar assist. Ooh, we have a scroll viewer assist. I might want to check that. Arrow visibility. And then we are going to go and once again grab this off of our scroll bar because this is a scroll bar button, so this thing being used outside of a scroll bar doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's see, ancestor type, scroll bar, and let's just check that guy real quick. I don't think he was set to propagate. No. To do the propagation, you basically have to, I believe you set framework property metadata. And then there's an enum for behaviors, and you can set, I think it's called inherits, if I'm not mistaken. And then I need to close my setter. Okay, so that guy, yeah, he's confused. We're going to relaunch. And hopefully now our scroll bar still has that kind of mildly rounded view, but then no buttons. I'm wondering if, given that this is on Scrollbar Assist, if rather than arrows visibility, is buttons visibility clear enough? See, again, I go back and forth on what the appropriate name is for these things. On a scroll bar, would you call it a button? I mean, it's functionally a repeat button, but I'm wondering if button visibility makes sense. That might be slightly cleaner than arrow visibility, I think. Maybe button visibility, arrow visibility, repeat button visibility. It probably should definitely end in visibility to match the property that we're targeting with it. Hey, look at that. Repeat button's gone. Oh. But that's a little disconcerting. I would have expected the scroll bar to actually be able to go top to bottom, which it's not. Okay. So that is not quite right. So once again, let's go back to our old pal Snoop and figure out why is my track not filling that space. Oh, that's max height. I'm okay with max height because that would mean that min should be 0, which its content is collapsed at the moment, so I would expect it to be 0. Jump me here. Okay, so there's that, and there are the 2 repeat buttons. That's inside of the track. Let's see. So there is our grid. Line up button is hidden. Height and width of 0. Track down button. Height and width of 0. Okay. So my question is why can that track? So the grid itself that contains everything has a height of 660. If we look at our track, 626, something is getting space allocated to it. And it's the two row definitions are not collapsing to 0 like I would have expected them to. Now the question is why. So let's take a look at their height. Min height 0. Oh, interesting. So it's getting a height of star. I think, okay, so I think what we just do is height auto. To let them collapse. So now we've got a track that fills the entire length. So apparently our list view doesn't go all the way to the bottom. There's some amount of space on the end, but our thumb is able to traverse the whole stack. Okay, that makes me feel better, but let's turn them back on to make sure that still works. Visible. Go and update. Thinking. Okay, so now there's our buttons back. Great. And yeah, the buttons do cut off before we get all the way to the bottom. It does bother me that the buttons don't seem to have a mouse down effect on them. Check that other one. I think this is likely due to, this is probably just Chrome doing that. It would be really nice to have a similar effect on those buttons, but that might be a task for another day. Okay, so that works, and then in the rare case where somebody wants to hide them but still keep the scroll bar in the same position, can't think of a use case right now, but that does block it because the actual containing grid is bigger. Open back up, please. Yeah. So that there is a little space top and bottom for where those buttons would be. Okay, so that is fine, but we need to fix it. This fixed it, or I should say, this auto change here only fixes it for the vertical scroll bar, and we have horizontal to think about too. So it'll be a similar change of auto there, width auto there. Okay, so, and I think I'm going to rename this to be minimal. All right, okay. So that's obviously going to break the universe because this is the style that I want, the name that I want to end up with, basically moving minimal from the middle to the end. That way, in your IntelliSense, if you type material design scroll bar, minimal's the next thing that shows up, and then away you go. Okay, so that gets us into a nice scroll bar situation, I think. At least in terms of this and this. So the last feature I believe we wanted was some ability via the style to effectively configure the size. So you'll notice in the original change, before I butchered it, this guy is actually quite a bit narrower than the default scroll bar. So this is somewhat a deviation. Like it follows the design of a lot of them. Like the old Google Hangouts app had a thinner scroll bar on the side. It didn't have the rounded edges, and several of them do shrink the width a little bit. But in here, we're defaulting to pulling the size off the system default, which means it's essentially the same as what's in Visual Studio here, is your scroll bar has a default system parameter. So we should definitely use the system parameter as our default. However, I don't want to preclude somebody from changing it. So the first question is, do we have a separate property for height and width? Probably. Probably. As much as I could do a single one with like scroll bar size, but that feels a little too ambiguous as far as what its intention is supposed to be. So let's do two attached properties. I think that'll probably work out better. So double scroll bar. Ooh, actually, it's not really scroll bar. I think we should call this thumb width. The only part that's giving me pause is thumb width works, but if we have thumb width and thumb height, is it going to be confusing to people that, for example, thumb height isn't going to have any effect on a vertical scroll bar? Because obviously the scroll bar should reflect the amount of the contents that it's scrolling through, not necessarily the size that you set here. I'm going to code it this way for now, but no promises that this doesn't change. This feels like an awkward API that needs to be cleaned up. So if anybody in the chat has feedback on what they think would make it cleaner, I definitely would love to hear it. Let's see here. So thumb width, thumb height. And so then the question is, how do we want to toggle which one we're using? Because this is just pulling a dynamic resource off this key. So this is just creating a resource key. Do we change up a value in a resource key? And no, that feels wrong. Yeah, because if you want to change the width of the scroll bar, that's fine, but ultimately what we're talking about wanting to do is change the size of the thumb within it, because down here, the old one, or I should say the one that was done here where it was a smaller thumb, where was that done? There's that. Thumb there is declared and has a width set on it. So on ours up here, we've got a track, we've got a thumb, and we could set it here, or we could set, oh, I should switch you off of this, because I would like to remove all, let me just hunt the library real quick. I want to make sure if I'm declaring this as obsolete that we aren't using it anywhere else in the library and instead using the new base style. I suspect inline in this file is the only place these are used directly. And this one should have two usages, one here and then one I'm about to go replace, because there should be one down for the horizontal scroll bar thumb that was being done. Yeah, so this guy right here. So find results, find results. Yep, only those two. Perfect. So we'll just deprecate those styles in favor of our new one. Okay, so these are those two repeat buttons that effectively exist. So on the scroll bar, the empty area between the thumb and the actual up-down buttons are technically hidden repeat buttons, so that when you click on that area, it automatically does a jump. So the question then is this guy. I think this is fine to just bind it right here. Well, let's do the vertical one first. That way we can test it and then go from there. I think what we do is here we do width, binding, and I think we can get actually, so path, once again, WPF, and then Scrollbar Assist. This is the vertical one, so we're going to be binding the width. And then because we're actually sitting inside of a control template, I believe we can just do a relative source template parent, because we're going to be looking for this attached property applied to the scroll bar itself. It should, that's a long line. I'm just going to drop that down and make that fit on my screen. Okay, so let's go down and test this guy again. And our fun little option. So I'm going to go with collapse for now. And then, let's see, rather than arrow visibility, thumb width, value 5. Something, actually, let's do this. Value 10. That way with our corner radius, we get a perfectly rounded top and bottom edge. Let's make sure this works. And if this works, we will just apply the same thing on the horizontal scroll bar, and then I think we'll just about have all the features we wanted. So then a little cleanup of some of this other stuff, and then we will push it and get it merged into the 260, which is effectively latest on the master branch. If somebody wants to help out and you're a little unsure about coding, something that I always appreciate, if you want to download the latest nightly builds off of NuGet and start testing out some of the new features or the changed areas, that would be incredibly helpful. I always appreciate it when people test the new builds and we can find bugs before shipping something out. Material design scroll bar rounded. That is because it is no longer called rounded anymore. I renamed it and then did not fix it on my main window. Try again. And for people who haven't seen this kind of work before, so with WPF, you can actually inject and in a sense override the styles that are being used. So anything that's using a dynamic resource or is implicitly being resolved by its type, like for example scroll bars, the style that's applied to them is an implicit style based upon this control type. Excuse me. By declaring this style here in the list box resources, it will get found prior. So when the list box goes to look up its scroll bar, the style for its scroll bar, it effectively walks back up the tree looking for a style for this. And so it'll walk up and it'll find this one first. If this one's not here, it'll keep walking its way up. It'll hit the window, won't find anything in the window, jump over to the app.xaml and look there, and that's where it'll find the merge dictionaries for, say, things like the material design and XAML library, and then resolve the scroll bar type. The same thing can be done in a lot of cases if you're looking for a way to override colors. In the library, I hope everywhere, we're using dynamic resources for the colors so that they respond to theme changes. So that means that if you want to hijack a color, you can just declare a brush inside of a resource that's at a closer level to the element you want to change than your app.xaml, and everything underneath that will get that, it'll resolve to that brush instead. Okay, so back over here, nicely rounded corners and a nice even scroll bar. I like it, I like it, I like it. So if we wanted to go with a nice minimalist style, I don't think the minimalist style is going to have the rounded corners on it. I think by default, if we jump back over here, I think what's probably going to happen is the minimalist style is going to probably ship looking something like this. I think that's probably the case. That's pretty close to the way I've seen a lot of the scroll bars for material design, because different libraries have done different implementations of the scroll bar, and I think this has been one of the more common ones. I think the width may actually even be slightly narrower. I'm hesitant to, so there is a fun trick, like that might be too narrow. And go back to the 10. The Fluent design, so Microsoft's design paradigm that they've put out for like UWP apps, they actually have their built-in scroll bar collapses down to only a few pixels wide until you mouse over it, and then you get the nice wide scroll bar to interact with. So if somebody wanted to go and implement that, having these types of properties here would allow that, so that you could write your own trigger and effectively toggle this property to get that look. So back up here, we need to apply effectively this same thing here to the horizontal one, only for the height. So we're going to go down here, and rather than width, we're going to do height. And rather than thumb width, we're going to do thumb height. And that should fix that. Okay. So I think we're going to go with that. Okay, so let's do that out. That is no longer used. These control templates are no longer used. This scroll bar thumb is no longer used. So there's that. Let's move up, move up, move up. Move up, move up. Scroll bar, repeat button, scroll bar, repeat button. Okay. So there's that. Because this guy is effectively just a straight up transparent button. Yeah, literally doesn't show up at all. Scroll bar page button, scroll bar line button. What is the difference here? Where are you used? Interesting. Scroll bar line button is not used at all. Which begs the question then, was it something that was added by this pull request, or was this something new? Let's take a quick look here. So if we bring this pull request back over, let's see here. Pull requests. Let's grab that guy real quick. Because I'm wondering if this needs to be minimal scroll bar. Yeah, new one to avoid conflicts, but we're not going to use the new one. So let's just look at the files changed, because this one, this pull request hasn't been updated with any changes that we've done tonight. So everything in here is new changes. So this is just a lot of white space cleanup, which is fine. Where is the... There we go. Hide white space changes. I really don't care that much. I usually just eyeball white space changes to make sure that they aren't atrocious. But usually when I see white space changes, it's because somebody has just... so it was added here. Got it. Because he effectively needed the same type of one here, but then ended up using that anyway. So I'm curious. Scrollbar line button. So, that's where that got used. Got it, but we whacked that control template, so that shouldn't matter now. Okay, perfect. So we can get rid of this guy, and that is no longer necessary. So fewer code is usually better code. Scrollbar page button. Now I'm curious if this is the one that's actually used, or if this one was added. Yeah, because this is the repeat button transparent, so this was added with the other one as well. Let's just confirm that real quick. Yes, it was. Okay, so we have all of these prefixed with material design, so those match. This repeat button transparent. These two are going to ultimately deprecate and get removed in favor of the common style because we have no reason to not use a single one. We've got some fancy new attached properties. I do think I want to rename this arrow visibility. I think I want to go with buttons visibility for now. I think that so far that's the best name I've come up with. So just whack them all. Yeah, do it. Thanks. Because I think that's again, that's the best name I've got, and so hopefully that works out. So the one other area I want to test, so there is some implicit scroll bars on a couple other controls. So specifically in areas like the data grid, it has a scroll viewer built on, and I just want to confirm that the changes that we've done don't accidentally break the fact that I've whacked all of these storyboards off of the scroll viewer, which is again one level up from the scroll bar itself. So hopefully that comes through a little nicer. Come on, go Visual Studio, go! So for those people who are not familiar, there's a concept called rubber duck debugging, and I've heard various versions of the story float around online, but it usually goes something along the lines of developer goes to his boss with a question, boss gives him the answer, sends him back to work. A little while later he comes back, asks another question, boss, being gracious, gives him the answer again and sends him back to work. And then ultimately, by the third time when he asks the question, the boss gets smart and hands him a rubber duck and tells him, okay, next time before you come and ask me a question, explain your problem to the duck, and if you still don't know the answer after explaining it to the duck, then come and ask me. And it is shocking how many times simply explaining your problem out loud ends up, quote unquote, fixing the problem. These guys are not going to show a scroll bar, which is problematic. And more importantly, this scroll bar isn't showing at all, which is also problematic. So there is a scroll bar here, which is great, but it is coming up empty. So we have broken something. Let's figure out what. So I don't necessarily always have a rubber duck, but in exchange, I'll usually just talk to Visual Studio directly, because it's always better to confide your mistakes in a inanimate thing like Visual Studio that can't repeat them to anyone else. Though in my case, I'm doing it on a live stream, so I guess there's video evidence of all of my mistakes, but it's still helpful. And if anyone ever wants a virtual rubber duck, rubberduckdebugging.com. Wonderful little rubber duck, and you can even chat with a duck if you'd like. The duck on the website is about as helpful as a regular rubber duck would be. Okay, scroll bar. We broke something. So let's take a look here. Track. I assume it's going to be down here. Okay. The thumb has a color. There is the problem. So, the problem we have inadvertently introduced is our attached properties are defaulting to 0, as most numeric types do, and then promptly breaking us when they are set there. So, the question becomes, what is the appropriate value for those? Because we don't want to blindly universally apply those. We only want to apply those sometimes. Well, I suppose we could data trigger it. I'm wondering if double is the appropriate size, or if it should be a nullable double. You know what I think we should do? Well, okay, so we can actually cheat. So I hate doing this, but it does work. So we'll throw it in real quick, and then we'll explain what's going on. So the nan, and I'm going to double check this here in just a moment, but I believe if we were to look at on the width property itself, so we'll go to the framework element width property, the default value of this guy is double.nan. So by defaulting ours to double.nan, it will be the same as if the width property was never set. Same with the height. I guess I'm okay with that, because that's how the built-in width and height properties work on framework element, and so these attached properties are effectively forwarding those out. They're called thumb width and thumb height. Yeah, that makes sense. Though I'm not sure that that double nan trick is, though it makes sense to somebody who is very familiar with the inner workings of WPF, I don't know if it's necessarily familiar or makes good sense to a brand new person starting to learn this framework. So, but I think for now it is what it is. We'll take it. So let's see, we were on the grids page and we were collapsing the height of our window to cause the scroll bar to come up. And there we get our scroll bar. It has our nice animations. Yeah. Okay, so that works. If we come over here, this guy has the nice minimalist style to show that off a little. better. Better, 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 better. And there we can see the horizontal one working. So it is interesting to me that these horizontal ones don't appear to have the same lightened work as the other ones. That's interesting to me. That makes me wonder if we missed something in one of these changes. 583, did we make a change and then not propagate it down? Ah, there it is. Opacity 0.5. So 5835. So we brought down the Visual State Manager, but not the default value. There we go. Now they all look the same. See, this is why we test. Okay. Sweet. I'm happier with this. I am happier with this. So let's just quickly review these changes and then we'll get these pushed in and I think we can just merge them. So let's see here. So main window, I assume it's just bringing back in. Thank you, Snoop, go away. So this guy, ooh, look at this. They've got a scroll bar. Interesting. They just allow full transparency. Not sure that's what we want as default, but kind of cool. So this guy here is just no idea why it's highlighting line 46. Must be a white space change that I can't see. But just adding in the resource for the scroll bar to force it into the minimalist style. Scrollbar Assist, we should see a whole bunch of added attached properties. We also renamed it to buttons visibility from arrows visibility. Let's see, we kicked on the defaults, we switched back from using the new style back to the original one, which is I think what we want. That way everything lives in one style and you just toggle stuff on and off with a secondary style to have it. We added, let's see, visibility on the scroll bar, and then a whole bunch of changes. So white space there. Let's move you over so we can actually see this. So thumb there, height, width, opacity, thumb radius. Great. Those guys get deprecated. Wonderful. Group state. So the opacity change, Visual State Manager, auto, grid row. Just making a quick mental note of all of these so we can compare them with what's down here. So default state, which was the last bug on the horizontal scroll bar. Visual states brought down, so 5.8.3. It may be worth extracting these values out into a shared resource so that they can be used in both places. The problem with extracting them into a shared resource is then theoretically somebody else could reference them, and I don't really want to expose those, but again, so let's see, with auto on these to allow it to collapse on the scroll bar visibility, column setter, and then the height of this guy. Again, if anybody has suggestions on these Scrollbar Assist properties, thumb height versus thumb width, again, the problem I really don't like about them is I don't think it's completely obvious that if I set thumb height, it's only going to apply to a horizontal scroll bar. I think implicitly it makes sense, but I don't necessarily want to trust that that tracks for everybody. And then a bunch of deletions in our minimalist style at the bottom. Oh, we should clean this guy up. We should clean him up. Yeah. So let's just go. In general, I avoid just commenting out code because we have source control. That's what it's for, is to keep track of a history of stuff. So unless there's a reason to leave it in, I generally advocate clearing it out, keeping the code base clean. So that should be there, stage file. Now hopefully you just show a bunch of deletes. Okay, so we will put a commit. Cleaned up scrollbar style. So let's see. Moved to only having a single style and toggling values with attached properties. Let's see. Added attached properties for thumb corner radius, height, and width. Anything else? Renamed minimal style to match other styles in the library. Okay. Commit. And one of the perks of having write access on the library is I can push my changes to pull requests. So unless he's unticked the box to deny me that permission, but by default it is on. So huzzah! So now this guy is there, and we should see the CI build kick off in just a moment. So we will. I intentionally put, if you see me mark myself as a reviewer, really all that is a reminder to myself that I want to make sure that I get something reviewed before it gets merged in. So don't take that as a negative by any means. It really just means that at the time I saw your pull request, I didn't have time to review it, and I left myself a little to-do reminder. Okay, so as soon as this guy, the progress checks pass, which shouldn't take but more than a moment. We don't have a lot of unit tests in the library, largely because this is a theme library, and so there's not a whole, we can't necessarily really unit test a theme library very easily. So a lot of it is kind of done visually and on the fly in the demo app. So again, I do appreciate it if people are actually willing to go and test out those preview builds and see how things work. Even just downloading the demo app and playing with the newer features that come in to make sure that it's not breaking anything is amazing. Because we have gotten bug reports of people testing those CI builds ahead of time, and it's always appreciative to get those in. Come on, pipeline. You can do it. You can do it. Let's see. View more details. Go gadget. That's what I want to see. I want to see what you're doing. Yay, it compiles. Now it runs a slew of unit tests. And then it'll technically do some demoing and some pushing of stuff. Don't necessarily worry about these. So right now we're running 2 CI pipelines. We're using Azure DevOps and AppVeyor sort of in parallel. There's some stuff I want to do on the DevOps pipelines, and once I'm satisfied that they're working appropriately, then we'll go ahead and turn off AppVeyor, because DevOps just gives you a lot more power and control over every little detail. Don't take this as a negative on AppVeyor. I think it is by far, if you're doing an open source project, it is the easiest CI system I've used to get up and running. It's a lot of point, click, and away you go, and everything just works. There's a little bit more munging of stuff that you have to do. You can just compare the difference in the YAML files for both the Azure DevOps pipeline and the app fair at the root of our repo. Success. Success, success, success. And perfect. So we will, let's see, make sure this is in the 2.6.0 release, which it is. Great. Squash and merge. Yeah, great. Perfect. So that'll kick that off. And the merge into master is what will ultimately kick off a CI build out to NuGet. So that'll go out shortly. And let's see. So this guy should be marked as fixes, or should be marked as fixed. And then this PR, I think we just need to add a comment to. So let's just make sure everything goes the way it's supposed to here. So this guy is marked as fixed. He's in 2.6.0. Great. And then I think, yeah. Actually, I think we want to leave a comment on that other one because there was quite a bit of discussion on here. Let's work. Styles in and done. See the work on PR, and I've already forgotten my number, 1270. Yeah, that one. Okay, so we will close and comment on this one, which gets us a little closer to getting this 2.6.0 release out the door. A little bit closer, slow and steady. Slow and steady. So if anybody is interested, issue 646 has all of this scrollbar stuff in it. So for all of the discussion, 70... everyone. And my spelling is not great, but we will throw that on there, and that way people are clear. Because again, I do very much value everyone's feedback on this stuff. So this is all about kind of having this be what's useful for people. So let's take a quick look, because I know 81%. So this icon pack I threw in, this just needs to be done. So the icon pack inside of this library just pulls the material design icons, but it's done via the, there's a separate project. Let me just pull it open here real quick. So if we jump in here, this MD-Res project in here is actually what has all of the code. I think there was, yeah, this resource generation is the solution file for it. So it'll go through and generate like the default color palette resource dictionaries. It'll go through and generate the material design icons. It's basically just a simple CLI app that can do a bunch of this auto generation. Something I would love to get in is a nightly build out on Azure DevOps that can go through and pull in the material design icons, and if there's a change, just commit it. That way master doesn't lag behind every time there's a change here. I try to keep track of when they release updates, but quite frankly, I get busy or I miss them, and it doesn't always get updated. So I do try before we do a release like 2.6.0 to make sure that I go and run that just to pick up all of the latest stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always in there. So this memory leak is probably the next thing I want to work on, as these types of bugs I usually try to or I should say bugs in general, unless they're very low priority, I try to prioritize above features. And we've got several bits of stuff that people have brought in and fixed. So, and this one here is just a wiki change, so that one might get knocked out quickly. This is a pretty simple bug if anybody wanted to pick it up. But it's also one that the necessity of it is a little less with the new theming stuff. Yeah, I may end up, I realize I'm the one who opened it, but I may end up just punting it as well. So that I think is the state of where the rest of this 2.6.0 stuff goes. This specified colors for themes, I think, why did I leave this open? I thought it should have been resolved. Oh, because this was separating the colors from the brushes. I'm not entirely clear the value of this. I see what it's doing, and I just don't recall. I need to take a look at this and figure. That's why I left it open, because I don't know if that's existing brushes with material design colors. Not to use existing brushes. So that was the deal. Needing to create your own brushes to override theirs and reuse the same colors. Got it. Okay. I will go through and check this, because just exposing them in the resource dictionary is fine and will work right up until you do a theme change from light to dark. Oh, that's something we didn't actually test. Let's do that real quick, because we should really verify that our scrollbar stuff works in dark theme as well. Hey, look at that. Nice. Again, that was the beauty of using the material design body brush, is I knew that it would then translate well into matching whatever the foreground color was. There's a couple places where we do that. It's kind of a blessing and a curse to do it that way. It's the easiest option to make sure that things look good across the themes, but it can also bite you if somebody wants to go and override it. In this case, I don't think it's that big of a deal, because we could do that same color implicit resource at the scroll bar level and hijack it, and it's the only thing inside of the scroll bar, so it shouldn't have any adverse effects. Sweet. Okay, well, I think with that, I'm probably going to sign off for the night. Thank you for coming and hanging out for a little bit and doing some code. Hopefully this has been helpful for people. I do appreciate when I hear people say that they either watch the videos or subscribe, just so that I know that this is actually useful for people and I'm not just wasting my time and prattling on and on and on by myself. I will sign off. I will get this uploaded to YouTube probably in the next 24 hours. I try to not let them linger too long. So hope you guys all had a fun night. Again, thanks for coming and hanging out. Talk to you next time.